Combat Development and Integration, or CD&I, is the institutional and intellectual epicenter for the evolution of the Marine Corps. They assess the environment, develop and validate concepts, identify capabilities, and develop solutions to ensure Marine Corps operating forces have the necessary capabilities to remain the world's foremost expeditionary warfighting organization. As part of CD&I, the Capabilities Development Directorate, or CDD, develops and integrates warfighting capability solutions that provide for an effective, integrated Marine Air-Ground Task Force capability, current and future, that anticipates strategic challenges and opportunities for the nation's defense. Today, I'm pleased to welcome to the show Brigadier General Stephen Lightfoot, Director for the CDD at CD&I. Welcome, General.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate you, Tripp, inviting me over to Syscom today. This is my first podcast ever, believe that or not, and I'm humbled and privileged to be here. I'm hoping I can provide some value.
Well, maybe once the world understands that you're amenable to go on podcasts, you'll get some more invites. So
maybe.
you can be so lucky. Yeah. All right, so, sir, you have quite an extensive Marine Corps background. Can you tell us a bit about your previous assignments and how you came to your current position?
Yeah, I can do. Let's see. So we'll try to summarize 29 years as efficiently as possible. As a Cobra pilot, fleet assignments include numerous HMLAs, MAGs, and wings with MU, Okinawa, UDP, OAF, and OEF experience. Served at HMX-1, flying the President of the United States in Marine One. Served as Executive Officer of the Basic School, TBS. Was the Commanding Officer of Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron 469, call sign Vengeance, at Camp Pendleton, and also Marine Aircraft Group 24, call sign Pacific Eagles in Hawaii. I also had the privilege of serving with Special Operations Command on a one-year deployment with Special Operations Joint Task Force Afghanistan. I served as military assistant and aide-de-camp to the Undersecretary of the Navy and have multiple Headquarters Marine Corps tours, including M&RA as a Lieutenant Colonels and Colonels Monitor, Headquarters Marine Corps Aviation, and now at Headquarters Marine Corps Combat Development and Integration as the Director for Capabilities and Development. As far as how I got the job, I took over as the CDD Director in June of 2022 from Major General Smash Austin, who is now the Commanding General of 1st MAW in Okinawa. And I previously served as his ACE Director, that's the Aviation Combat Element, here at CDD, and learned a lot from him.
Well, sir, I appreciate your 29 years of service. Thank you very much. So how does your experience inform your work at CDD?
Most importantly, I've learned from stellar leaders of all ranks across the MAGTAF, both officer and enlisted, military and civilian. One of the most important lessons I've learned is the importance of relationships. Build relationships before you need them so the trust is already there when it is time to work together. Every single previous assignment helped to prepare me for every single follow-on billet, including this one. What I think really helped the most is the diversity of billets over the past 29 years, in the air, on the ground, in training and combat, from the FMF to the Pentagon, and with service from the East Coast to the West Coast to the Indo-Pacific. All of it helped to shape my current perspective. The lean, mean corporal and captain deployed to the forward edge, they deserve our very best effort in every regard, and so do their families. The Commandant has provided clear guidance on modernizing our Corps in order to keep the Marine Corps the most capable expeditionary fighting force on the planet, so we're doing that to the best of our ability. Mission first, people always.
We at Systems Command, I know our mission, we field equipment to fulfill requirements. Much of the requirements conversation is driven by feedback from Marines in the field, doing the work and identifying capability gaps. What is your relationship like with the fleet, and how do you facilitate that feedback?
Well, ultimately, what drives what we do at CDD is the threat. And clearly, we're focused on China right now. We rely on the fleet to identify the capability gaps that eventually drive the requirements process and help us ensure we are providing the resources fleet commanders need to outpace the threat and win the next fight. There are a lot of ways inside of the campaign of learning for CDD to get that feedback. We absolutely rely on fleet participation in IPTs and OPTs. We need fleet participation in wargaming and experimentation conducted by McWill. We're hungry for lessons learned from the fleet. For example, everything that 3rd MLR does right now is an opportunity for us to learn, validate concepts, and identify capability gaps. We observe and capture lessons learned from every fleet exercise. Recently, we've been sending teams out to the fleet to talk about what we do at CDD and solicit direct input. In fact, I just made a trip with several of my key staff members to Hawaii, Guam, and Japan, and that experience was incredibly valuable for us in terms of both the enhanced understanding it provided of many of the problems the fleet is facing and in terms of the relationships we were able to reinforce. Getting buy-in from the fleet to participate in the requirements process. The fleet also has access to the universal needs process to register both urgent and deliberate universal needs statements. We actually just launched a new online system for submitting and tracking universal needs statements, and we're in the process of staffing an updated universal needs order for fleet input. Unfortunately, not every need identified by the fleet will be validated as a requirement and become a program of record, but the UNS process at least provides a mechanism for direct input to CDD, regarding your question regarding gaps identified by fleet commanders.
So I imagine that your own prior experience helps to bridge the gap between COs out in the fleet, they're identifying gaps, and then your team acting on them.
Yes. One of the great things about CDD is that we're staffed with a combination of GS civilians, contractors, and they're experts in the acquisitions and requirements process, as well as our uniformed Marines who come from the fleet and in most cases will return there. Constantly cycling current fleet experience through CDD helps keep us in touch with the fleet and helps us make sure we are staying operationally relevant. We couldn't do this mission without the expertise of our civilian Marines, but there's no question we rely on our own experiences in the fleet as well and the ability to reach out to our peers in the fleet.
So to give our audience a little bit of perspective on the level of the partnership between you at CDD and us here at Systems Command, each of our project officers at Syscom has a Capabilities Integration Officer, or a CIO, counterpart over at CDD. What is the importance of that relationship?
Communicate, communicate, and communicate more. Twice a month, I sit down with the GOs from McWill, Syscom, and OAD. So that's Brigadier General Ellison, Brigadier General Walsh, and Mr. Doug Hoffman at OAD. And the other 2 weeks per month, we hold meetings with the chiefs of staff and key personnel from the same organizations. We do that because it is absolutely critical that we are working together, hand in glove, and my expectation is that we are doing that at absolutely every level. In fact, I hope that in the trenches, the CIOs here at CDD are talking to project officers at Syscom even more often than that.
So on that, what advice do you have for our Syscom project officers to maximize that relationship?
I would say what I just told you is exactly what I would do. It's all about the communication to make sure that that we're maximizing what we know, what you know, and making sure that what we do together makes sense with that relationship.
Talk early, talk often.
You got it.
Good to go, good to go. So, all right, so we know that the requirements and the acquisition process takes time. There are scenarios where a Marine has a critical need for a warfighting capability. How do we handle those types of urgent needs?
Okay, so I think you're asking me to talk about the urgent universal needs process, and I will. But the real answer to your question is that meeting the fleet's urgent needs and requirements is a team effort that happens in conjunction with every part of Headquarters Marine Corps and Syscom. I mentioned the UNS process earlier when you asked about mechanisms for fleet input to CDD. The urgent universal needs process managed by our accelerated development branch at CDD is a mechanism for the fleet to highlight a capability gap that could result in mission failure or loss of life during combat or contingency operations. That's just what makes it urgent vice deliberate. MAR4 commanders can submit an urgent UNS, and once that urgent UNS is validated by DC CD&I, so now that's Lieutenant General Heckel, our staff assembles a team to work together on identifying a rapidly deployable solution. As well as assigning a CIO here at CDD, we reach out to P&R, Training Education Command, Systems Command, and M&RA to make sure we are looking at every aspect of the problem from funding to manning and training. It's important to understand a couple of things about this process, though. First of all, it's designed to move much faster than the normal requirements process. But there isn't a magic pile of money somewhere that lets us fund things just because they are really important. Everything is really important. So to fund something outside of the normal POM process, we have to take money from another program, and there's no way to do that without decrementing those programs. Sometimes that's okay, but we have to look really hard at the long-term impact of the funding solutions we develop and make sure that the positive impact funding the urgent UNS will have is significant enough to justify the negative impact on the programs where we are finding the money. It's also important to understand that capabilities fielded through the urgent UNS process don't come with a sustainment associated with the normal requirements process. So a recent example of turning fast on a requirement is a recent project we've been working on to provide a deployable 3-star Joint Task Force headquarters capability for 2MEF. Instead of being an UNS, this was a commandant-generated requirement, and it's been awesome to watch the collaborative effort between 2MEF, MAR4Com, CDD, PNR, and Syscom come together to rapidly make it a reality.
So that kind of leads me right into my next question. We've talked about requirements and acquisition, and you bring up funding, right there. So money is important. What part does CD&I play in the overall budgeting process?
That's a good question. And CDD creates the plan for the Marine Corps budget. Specifically, our integration division, MCSID, works with all of the Marine Corps' 9 enterprise programming teams, or EPTs, to identify our budgetary requirements across all elements of the Marine Corps and combine that into a plan that we can deliver to P&R to further develop into the Marine Corps' actual budget submission through OSD to Congress. Right now, MCSID is working on the POM 26 plan. We recently transitioned POM 25 to P&R, and POM 24 is with Congress, and will hopefully be approved and fund Marine Corps requirements. Obviously, inside of CDD, the individual CIOs and divisions do a lot of work on individual programs to identify money requirements for their programs across the POM cycle, but fundamentally, in terms of the PPBEA process, CDD fills the planning, so that first P portion of PPBEA.
Sir, in my daytime job here as the Director for Acquisition Safety, I know that when we're working our formal risk acceptance process, we come to you as the user representative. Can you talk to how you see your role in that function?
Absolutely. In fact, I think that this is really important. Just to be clear, what CDD does in this process is accept the operational risk. If Syscom is working on a program and it is not going to meet a requirement or KPP, or a key performance parameter, within cost and technical feasibility, then Syscom comes to us for acceptance of the risk or relief of the requirement. So basically, Syscom manages risk within the program or the acquisition and budgetary risk, and we at CDD manage the risk to capabilities or to the concept of operation if the requirement can't be met. If you recall, earlier I talked about the great mix of civilians and active duty and uniformed Marines at CDD. This is one of the areas where that mix is a big deal. Having a recent fleet experience helps us stay focused on the why behind the requirement. With so many budgetary and programmatic aspects of a requirement, we must always maintain a clear sight picture of why we are doing it to begin with. That's our job here. We make sure that there isn't unacceptable risk to the operating concept behind a requirement or a program.
Thank you, sir. And, you talk about the mix of civilian and military. We have a similar mix here at Systems Command. So we see that within our workforce as well. So
one team, one fight.
One team, one fight. Absolutely. So developing capability solutions is certainly not an exact science. And I've got to imagine that you do a decent amount of experimentation, trial and error to get there. What part does the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab play in that process?
So overall, CD&I is made up of CDD, McWill, and the Operations Analysis Division, OAD. Experimentation, S&T, Science and Technology, and Wargaming are all things that fall into McWill's portfolio. The work that they do helps to inform the work that we do at CDD. They're basically the headlights. All of these things fill specific roles inside the campaign of learning. Brigadier General Ellison is the CG at McWill, and it would be worthwhile to get him over here to talk to you during a different podcast about all the things that McWill does and how they contribute to modernizing the Marine Corps and helping to shape us as a more lethal and capable force.
Well, sir, thank you for that recommendation. We will see about getting him on the show.
He's a rock star.
That'll be great to do. So we've talked a lot about what your team does, but I do have to ask, what are some of the challenges that you run into with all of this?
So first I would say is building the plan. Numerous OPTs, IPTs, CPRBs, CPIBs, and those are the Capabilities Portfolio Review or Integration Boards, condense all of the input from 9 EPTs. See if we can get some of our acronyms in here, which are the enterprise programming teams, it's the budgets. We have to take all of that, condense it into one cohesive and coherent plan that we can pass on to P&R. I would say another one, the second is probably justifying the money, working with and through OSD and Congress to get the money we need for the capabilities that the fleet requires. And finally, I would say industrial capacity. Sometimes the defense industry just can't keep pace with the capabilities we need. We really don't control technology development or production, and sometimes we face delays.
Many of the Marines that we've talked to on the show, or just in my daily life, they tell us how their perspective has changed from being a Marine out in the fleet using the gear to being an acquisition officer procuring the gear, ensuring it's suitable to field. How has your perspective changed from being a Marine out in the fleet to now being on this side of things?
I'd say that I've pretty much always been the recipient, of the tip of the spear. all of the hard work that's going on at the headquarters Marine Corps level is something that you just typically enjoy when you're out on the fleet, and you don't really know how it works. Also, as a former monitor, I spent a lot of time working with people. Like, where would you like to be assigned next? CDD is different. CDD is the equipment. It's the program. So it's not that it isn't about the people. It's that it's not about assignments of people. It's about how do we equip our people, our Marines, which is our asymmetric advantage in warfare. How do we equip them to do the things that they need to do to be the most capable that they can be? So I would say my perspective has adjusted from not just people, but also towards the things that we need to provide the people.
What advice then would you give for a young Marine who may be listening, who might be interested in doing what you do?
Oh, I would say tell your monitor to send you to CDD. If you're leaving the fleet and heading to a B billet, there is nowhere that you can be more relevant to the future of the Marine Corps than at CDD. I know that's a biased answer, but I actually believe it.
We'll take you at Systems Command, too, if you're interested in coming here as well.
Absolutely.
I always have to put in a push for our 8061 MOS. So I can't not have you on the show and without asking about Force Design 2030. So I'm interested. What part does CDD play in the Corps' vision for 2030?
Okay, so this is something I can talk for a long time on, force design and force modernization. And everything we've been talking about so far is Force Design 2030.
Well, sir, it's only a 3-hour show.
That's right. So we'll condense it down into another hour or so. So ultimately, Force Design 2030 is all about modernization. Force Design 2030 is all about outpacing the threat, and that's what our whole process is based on. The IPTs we host not only shape how we plan the budget, but they also provide a status check for where we are in our modernization process and are part of the process of producing the Force Design annual update. The Commandant participates directly in this process, and it really is one of the most powerful tools we have to communicate where we are with regard to force design and identifies where we need to make some rudder steers. In addition to capabilities development and planning the budget, CDD also fills an important role in answering questions about force design for senior political and military leaders. When senators, congressmen, and other influential leaders have questions about force design, it often falls either to me or to one of my staff members to head up to Capitol Hill and educate them on what we are doing with Force Design 2030 and why. It's hard to overemphasize how important this part of the job really is, because if we can't fund our programs, we can't innovate, and we can't develop the capabilities that we need to fight and win. Winning over the support of our civilian leadership has been a huge part of the success of Force Design 2030, but I'm happy to say that all signs point to the fact that we're winning that fight. Starting in 2018, our national strategy documents produced by our civilian leaders directed us to shift our focus to China and the Pacific, and we are miles ahead of all of our sister services when it comes to complying with that guidance. We are absolutely seeing the benefits of those efforts in Congress now, and if you haven't seen the bipartisan bicameral letter released a few days ago and spearheaded by Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, urging Congress to approve the Marine Corps' 2024 budget request designed to accelerate force design, you should take a look at it. It is a clear acknowledgement from our political leadership that the Marine Corps is getting it right and that our efforts deserve funding. In addition to educating our own leadership, CDD often provides briefs and leads conversations with our partners and allies about force design. Force design and the SIF, the Stand and Force, and EABO, Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations concepts can't succeed without integrating with partners and allies, and that process starts with peacetime conversations right now. We regularly engage with the senior military leadership of countries across the globe. Some of those engagements are because countries like the Philippines and Australia, with whom we have established relationships, want to make sure they understand what we are doing and that we are working together effectively. Some countries, like Sweden and Norway, want to meet with us because they see the applicability of what we are doing in the Pacific to their corners of the globe and don't want to be left out. And still others see the need to reshape and modernize their own militaries and are looking to us as a successful model of effecting change and want to be able to replicate what we are accomplishing. The bottom line is that the world is watching us and wants to be a part of what we're doing. Just as an example, about 2 months ago, the Commandant of the Philippine Marine Corps came here to Quantico to talk about force design and try to understand how to effect similar change with their Marine Corps. They have 4 regiments that historically have been almost, I'd say, 100% engaged in counterterrorism and counterinsurgency operations. They're shifting 3 of those 4 regiments to a coastal defense role along their northern coast to counter Chinese incursion into their territorial waters, and they see us as key partners in that effort. That is a huge change moment for their service. and it demonstrates that our efforts to work closely with friends and partners are succeeding. Similarly, the Australians are beginning the process of retooling their military. They're reducing the size of their historical heavy land forces and refocusing on littoral mobility and long-range precision fires, similar to our MLRs, or Marine Littoral Regiments. They view us as a key partner, and for us, the access they provide in the Pacific and the value of their location as one of our global positioning network sites is strategically important.
All right, well, unfortunately, we got like 2 more hours to go, so we're going to need more answer on that. But no, really, so what is next for CDD?
Okay, so like I said at the beginning of our conversation, what we do is dependent on the threat. Modernization and capability development in the Marine Corps is informed by the threat and by the strategic guidance provided by our leadership. So we constantly work with MCIA to assess the threat and then look at what we need to do in terms of staying on course, shifting course, accelerating, etc., in order to stay one step ahead of the threat and make sure Marines are equipped to dominate the battle space across every domain. Fundamentally, I think our process is sound. The enemy gets a vote, so we will make adjustments over the next few years in terms of the capabilities that we prioritize as we adapt to the constantly evolving threat. But fundamentally, our campaign of learning will continue to shape what we do and how we do it.
So what's next for Stephen Lightfoot?
Oh, I'll be the CDD director for at least another year. That was at my request. I think that this is a very, very broad billet. It's a mile wide and it goes more than an inch deep in many ways. It takes kind of a year, I would say, just to get up on plane. And then in the second year is when I'm hoping to be able to give back a lot more. Part of the reason I'm volunteering a second year is because the people I work with are absolutely fantastic. I really, really enjoy the mission, and I enjoy the people I get to work with on a daily basis. And that's what makes you want to stick around.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming in and having a conversation about what CDD does and how we meet the fleet's needs. I appreciate it. We do have a thing around here that we call our lightning round. You ready to field the lightning round questions?
Ready for the lightning round.
When you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So this is almost going to sound like I got it ready for this, but I would say, actually, I wanted to be a pilot. My dad was an Air Force officer, and he flew C-141 Starlifters and C-130 Hercules, and he flew them all over the world. He worked really hard and loved flying. I've always looked up to my dad and knew that I wanted to fly too. And he also encouraged me to join the Marine Corps, but that's a different story.
Well, kudos, because a lot of the guests come in and they haven't done the thing they said they wanted to be when they were a child, but you've got wings on your chest, so congratulations.
I'm lucky.
So, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
I would say Abraham Lincoln, the 16th POTUS. Just the fact that he was born into poverty, self-educated, extremely hardworking, intelligent, and an honest leader. He closely supervised the strategy and tactics of the entire Civil War effort, including the selection of his generals. Obviously, he helped to abolish slavery. And I think he just has a lot of memorable quotes. And if you wouldn't mind, I'll just give you a couple of his quotes.
Let's have it.
So first one, whatever you are, be a good one. Folks are usually about as happy as they make their minds up to be. Those who look for the bad in people will surely find it. Be sure to put your feet in the right place, then stand firm. And finally, the best way to predict your future is to create it. And I just think that all those are true.
They're solid advice.
He's one of the best leaders in our history.
Well, so in the vein of advice then, next question, do you have any tips for maintaining a work-life balance?
This is something I talk about with folks all the time, actually, because I think it's critically important, or otherwise you can just burn out. And we can't afford to have our people burn out. So first thing is, and it may not be for everyone, but certainly for me, it's marry the right person. I would say my wife helps to keep me a healthy life balance for us and our family, and she keeps me in line with that, because there are some times I will potentially go off balance, and she says, no, come back to the fold. And I go, oh, that's right. That's what we need to do. I would say second, go to events that are important to your family and friends. Share in their happiness and cultivate your relationships. You can't attend after the fact, and you will almost definitely regret missing it. I understand that deployments and exercises often preclude attending events, but go when you can. And finally, go on vacations. Many thanks to my boss, Lieutenant General Heckel, who approved nearly 2 weeks of leave so my family could go on vacation in Europe. And we had a wonderful time seeing all kinds of sites, including Normandy and Belleau Wood, which again, that balance part with my wife, I said, we can go anywhere you want, but I would like to do these things. Right. And seeing all the sites was fantastic, but what I really enjoyed the most was spending quality time and new adventures with my wife and 3 kids.
Well, and to your wife and 3 kids, I want to thank them for being a great military spouse and military kids and understanding what you do and allowing you to give us 29 great years and more years to come.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. What is a TV show, book, movie, or podcast that you'd recommend?
So I've been recommending this book to people for the last several months, and I'd recommend the book 7 Seconds to Die, authored by retired Army Colonel John Antal. He analyzes the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, the first war in history won primarily by unmanned systems, fought between Armenia and Azerbaijan between September and November of 2020, which resulted in a decisive military victory in only 44 days for Azerbaijan. This book really makes you think about the value of ubiquitous unmanned systems and highlights why we're actually going to stand up an intelligent robotics and autonomous systems office here at CDD.
All right, well, thank you. And a little prescient when you talk about that war compared to, what we're seeing in Ukraine right now, a lot of unmanned systems fighting that war as well.
Absolutely. I would say it's not only the future, but it's the present. And so we've got a lot of work to do.
Well, General Lightfoot, again, thank you very much for coming in today. And I look forward to working with you on a regular basis. And I've appreciated the time.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to talk to you, Tripp.
Well, this concludes another episode of Equipping the Corps. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today. If so, please take a couple minutes to leave us a review, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. Until next time, stay safe. This is Tripp Elliott signing off.